Hello and welcome to the Liverpool Connection podcast. I'm Daz. I've got Steve with me, and today special guest is a freelance writer for This Is Anfield and These Football Times is Stephen Scragg. Hi, mate.
How are we doing? Thanks for the invite.
Yeah,
looking forward to a good chat.
Yeah, us too. Obviously, Liverpool fan, which is always good. And when was your love affair started with the Reds?
Oh, they've always been there. As far back as I can remember. My dad's a huge Red. He's 82 now, season ticket holder, who sits next to me when we can get to the games. Shared the good times and the bad times with him, and that's been great. So the youngest of three siblings as well. So my brother, huge Liverpool fan. So they were just always there. They were always an omnipresent figure. They were just a family member almost. So I can't remember a time when Liverpool didn't loom large in our household, and that they were just there. They've always been there.
And when was your first Anfield experience?
My first game was November 77. So I was only about 3 at the time, so preschool age. And my dad took my older brother and a friend over the road to the European Super Cup second leg against Hamburg, Keegan's return. Liverpool won 6-0, and either I insisted or my mum insisted that I went along as well. So, my dad overly ambitiously taking 3 kids to a midweek game in the depths of winter. And, my only recollection of that, hazy recollection, is the greenness of the pitch, the coldness of the night, the crowds of people outside. I remember just a sea of legs clicking through the turnstiles. And a horrendous pot of black peas, which is a northern delicacy that is very much like Marmite. You're either for it or against it. And for me, defiantly against it.
No Marmite for me, that's for sure.
I'm against it as well. It should be illegal. Growing up as a Red, we've been through the bad times and, back to the good times. What is one of your favourite matches from, obviously from 3 years old, you don't remember too many matches, but what's one of your favourite matches?
Well, I'd probably say that football properly kicked in for me in the early 80s. Say they were always there. I can remember vaguely Liverpool winning the European Cup in 78. So just remember the big shiny trophy in Dalglish. So for me, Dalglish was everything. From that era onwards, I was just hooked at a very early age. And that team, that 78, 79 team that just seemed to live forever. When I was a kid, this was the team that can trip off my tongue easily. Of Clements, Neil, Alan Kennedy. It's Hansen, it's Thompson, it's that 4-man midfield of epic proportions of Souness, McDermott, Case and Ray Kennedy, and then Dalglish and Johnson up front with either Fairclough or Highway on the bench. Mm-hmm. So that team just seemed to linger forever. So that aspect of when you're a kid, and a year will feel like a century. So that team just seemed to hang around forever. So in a way, when Rush and Whelan broke through, they felt like they were my players, that they were part of my team. And as much as I loved, and I well remember the 81 European Cup final, I was in hospital the night before my tonsils were being removed.
Oh.
Right next to a maternity ward. And all the dads in there had the game on a big screen, big long ward. And they insisted, they kind of overthrew the nurses' will to say, look, you go and have a break, go and watch Coronation Street. We'll look after the kids, but they need to come down here and watch this, watch the European Cup final with us. So that stuck in my mind forever. That, and but that 81-82 season, had a big impact on me, where the likes of Lawrenson had been signed, Craig Johnston came in, and it was just where alterations were made and those old gods kind of started to be moved on and alterations made. So yeah, that title clinching game against Spurs, the 3-1, Clements came back in a Spurs shirt. I always remember the image of him running down towards the Kop and the Kop applauding him prior to the match, and him applauding back and all of that. We beat them in the League Cup final about a month or so earlier. And yeah, that game, even down to kind of like Glenn Hoddle's screamer that opened the goal scoring that day, that remains my favourite goal Liverpool have ever conceded. If you're allowed to have such a thing, that goal, still replays in my mind every now and then. And then to come back on strong and win the game so emphatically, and the fact that Whelan played a big part in it as well, and Dalglish, the omnipresent hero. So yeah, that game was kind of the barometer for a long time, probably until the 5-0 against Forest, which that was the stellar game for my generation, of the 80s. So yeah, that one. That kind of like was unmovable until a certain night against Barcelona around what will we say, about 16 months or so ago, will it be now?
Yeah. Did you go to that?
Yes, I was at the Barcelona game.
I
was
bastard.
at the Forest game in '88. The Barcelona game was just the mention of it kind of like makes the back of the neck tingle.
Yeah, like a lot of the people that we've talked to that were there, out of George Sefton to Paul Moran, out of all the games, Liverpool have had, some amazing European nights. They're just like that night, just the roof was lifted off that stadium. So it must just watching it on the telly, it came through on the telly, but actually being there as well must have just been like the best thing of your life.
Oh, it was mind-blowing. It really was. I think wherever you watch that, you're going to take, special memories from it. You're going to remember exactly where you were and who you shared the game with, or even if you didn't share the game with people, that how you felt and what you did in the moments after those goals went in, and yeah, to be at Anfield that night was just something astronomical, because like I say, I'm in my mid-40s. I'm born in the 70s, a child of the late 70s throughout the 80s, which is your most impressionable era. You're at your most impressionable until you're about 15, 16. Mm-hmm. Once you're 16, you're maybe earning a bit of money, even if it's just a Saturday job or whatever it is. You start to notice girls. There are other distractions there. It doesn't mean that you don't love the football, but when you're in that peak zone of, say, 7 or 8 to kind of like 15, it is the be all and end all. It is absolutely everything. You imbibe it all. I can remember the goals. I can remember the games of that era. Now I'll struggle to tell you who we played last week. Doesn't mean that it doesn't matter much. It's just that I've got 3 kids under the age of 14, and yeah, the brain cells will not retain as much as they used to. So within that respect, yeah, for this game to come along, this Barcelona game, and yeah, really, it just blew everything else that had been before out of the water. Those goals, one after another. I mean, the first went in, and you think, yeah, great that we've got one back. And I always remember going into the ground that night, and we congregate on Flagpole Corner. Mm-hmm. Mate of mine, Andy Knott, who's the man behind the Cop mosaics. He was the best man. He's my best mate, and I always go and chat to him. 9 times out of 10 prior to a match, unless I'm skimming in late. We were chatting before the game, and people will come along and they drift in and out. So they buy a fanzine because he sells the fanzine. So yeah, some conversations 5 or 10 minutes. So they had this repetitive conversation over and over again about how do you think we're going to do tonight, and the worried people that came along and downcast and all of that. And I was like, well, no, because this Liverpool can do it. I give you no promises that they will do it, but we go into the game in the capacity that we can do it. So it was great seeing these conversations, and then the mood of the people who were coming along and chatting to you just kind of like changed, and they went off in a much more optimistic mood. and it was brilliant. And yeah, so when went in, this first goal went in, thought, well, hang on. But yeah, to get to half time, and then the 2 Wijnaldum goals, so early in the second half that just blew the roof off. So yeah, that Trent, my season tickets in the upper main stand, the new main stand, and the view of those goals was just the perfect place to be. And it's great on a European night up there. Jeff Goulding, who you've had on yourselves, you've spoken to him, he refers to us as the upper stand ultras. Because the atmosphere is really great up there.
I don't know if Jeff still has his ultra days about him, but yeah, he was an amazing guest. I'm thinking every time we hear this story and people say, yeah, this is the night. 20 years from now, it's going to be 500,000 people. We're going to be at that stadium that night, right?
Oh, definitely. It's like the Sex Pistols gig, isn't it, in Manchester, right, where there's about 17 people.
Right.
But, those 17 people stretch far and wide and counting the thousands. But yeah, I've been lucky enough to be at some epic nights. That Chelsea game in 2005, and Gudjonsson's shot that just drifts past the post, and all of that, the ghost goal, and I've been lucky enough to be at some special nights. But that Barcelona night, was it just tops the lot.
Well, especially because we were missing Mo and Bobby as well, so it was one of those where we had some unlikely heroes as well. I mean, I went into that match as well just thinking, I think we can beat Barca at home. Did I think we could do it 4-0? No chance. I was just like, if we beat Barca, at home, then we've put up something against them. But I just think it started from the first minute, and then Robbo giving Messi a nice little head rub. I think that set the tone.
That needle between Robertson and Messi was vital, and I think you didn't see it in the ground when you were there, but later on when you're seeing the footage of it again, and the close-ups of the reactions of the Barcelona players is very telling. You see the look on the face of Coutinho, the look on the face of Luis Suarez, because they know what Anfield was capable of doing. There was a very kind of shell-shocked look in their eyes, in the facial expressions from the moment that first goal went in. So in a way, those watching on television probably had a greater idea of what was to come than we did in the ground.
Yeah, I was in the pub. Steve was in the pub as well. I was actually on my way back home. I stopped by the pub to watch the match. So I had one of the best flights home ever. I was just buzzing. I didn't go to sleep. I just kept drinking. But I think Klopp set the tone as well. We just have one of the best managers in the world that he makes these players special. I mean, the players themselves, are a lot of them you wouldn't consider world-class superstars as Messi's and Ronaldo's. But when you get those 11 players on the pitch believing, what Klopp has instilled in them, it's just amazing to see, week in, week out. I mean, like our home record, we haven't lost at home for, in the league for what, three years now, basically. That's mad.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, he's kind of recreated what Liverpool used to do in that respect. Yeah. It was never about buying the shop bought superstar. That was what Manchester United did. That's what Tottenham used to do. Liverpool were always about, this is what we do. This is our template. This is how we do things. And the players that came in, yes, they needed to be able to play football, but it was as much about the personality and the mentality of the individual as it was about the skill of the player and the abilities of the player. We never went out and bought a Frank Stapleton. We never went out and consciously bought a Liam Brady. We used to identify a certain personality almost and say, yeah, that player can play. It's like Ian Rush, the story of Ian Rush and how, he came in and he struggled to fit into the dressing room, and he was, that lack of confidence and his struggles with, getting along with these star players and people taking their eyes out of him and not knowing how to respond, to the point that he walked into Bob Paisley's office and asked for a transfer, and kind of calling his bluff. Paisley said, yeah, fine. and it took that for him to kind of like walk away and someone else to put his arm around him and say, no, this is just like the way we do it. This is, and then, he turned it round. So, Liverpool would buy a player. Frank McGarvey was one, 79, 80. He was signed a sizable amount of money and never made it. He was gone back to Scotland within less than a season. The old transfer deadline of the spring transfer deadline. They took the money off Celtic for him to return. So that was a personality thing. Absolutely nothing wrong with his talent as a footballer, but he couldn't take it, and his personality couldn't fit at Anfield. This is something that Klopp has, introduced at Liverpool. We all for those much of those 30 years of waiting for that title to come. That phrase, and I used to hate it so much, was that last piece of the jigsaw. As if there was going to be a magic player that would just make everything else fall into place. And it was never going to be like that. It was a case of coming up with a system, coming up with a set of beliefs, and getting players to buy into it. And not just that, but to get the fans to buy into it. You've got to remember that when we missed out on that title 2013-14 under Rodgers, that broke the spirit of a lot of people at the club. It broke the spirit of the fans. That sense of hope was kind of gone. And he rebuilt that. There's that sense of buying into something and turning doubters into believers was the phrase, and I don't think it was that. I always err towards it. It's not quite the right phrase, or it's the right phrase, but it doesn't encompass what it all entailed and what it all meant. It was just a case of buying into the system, and it was given into turning hope into kind of like expectation almost. It was turning everything on its head. Everything had been about hope, and you shouldn't have to hope for it. You go out and get it, and this is what Klopp brought in. Stop hoping for things to happen and make things happen. This is what he did, and I've said it before that I think we got to a point with those near misses, the one under Evans, Houllier, which was a near miss but not quite a near miss. The defined near miss under Rodgers. Benitez had come relatively close as well. So to absorb all these misses, it had got to a point where I don't think anyone could have done this other than Klopp. But what he has now done has opened the door for kind of like his successors to come can build on what he's done.
Yeah, I think like with the team, I just think we needed to win silverware just to like losing that final in the European Cup against Madrid. I think really spurred the players on, because that's the season after that too. There wasn't one point where I was like, we're not going to win the league eventually with this man. I knew we would do it because we pushed City so far 2 seasons ago, and then this past season, juggernauts. Klopp's brought that Shankly-esque vibe, I think, back as well, because he not only gets the team, he gets the city as well, which is the greatest thing for me. He
just clearly enjoys it, and that's the thing is that he gets a massive amount of enjoyment out of the whole run of it. I think he loves the job that he does. He loves the environment that he does it in. He seems to absolutely love the people that he works with, and that's not just the players. You see the footage of it, you hear the stories of it, how he is behind the scenes with everyone. The canteen staff, everyone at the club, and that is very Shankly. Shankly was like that. It's kind of like a socialism at play.
Mm-hmm.
There's an inclusiveness that everyone plays a part in this. It isn't just this cocoon squad of 25 plus the manager. Everyone plays a part in dragging this football team along, and it's very telling, like you say. Those disappointments that they had. I was in Kiev that night, and other versions of Liverpool wouldn't have come back from that. We were a Liverpool that would take the big blows badly. You look at the way that 97 under Roy Evans, the fourth when we were pushing for the title, he was gone by late 98, so he was gone within 18 months. Houllier 2002, when 10 games from greatness, yet it unravelled. He was gone by 2004. Benitez 2009, gone by 2010. Rodgers 2014, gone partway into the 2015-16 season. Very, very defined way of not coping with disappointment at Liverpool for a long, long time. So to lose that final and the manner that they lost it in Kiev, but to come back and win it a year later, just days after losing out on the title, despite getting 97 points, and then a year after that saying, right, yeah, we've missed out on the title when we should have won it by 15 points, but we'll just go and win it next season. And I was convinced we'd win it last season. So very early on, and I'm not one to kind of say things just for the sake of it or to be overly optimistic just for effect. I will only say stuff like that if it's something I believe that I see. And it was only 2 or 3 games into the season in the Cabbage Hall I caught up with Jeff prior to one of the games, and I said it then that there was just, for me, a sense of inevitability that Liverpool were going to win the league. And I bought into and this is what Klopp had done, so I completely bought into it. But it was bound. It was grounded on, unlike under Rodgers, where there was shadow puppets involved, and he was great at the P.T. Barnum effect and drumming it all up. And yes, really felt we were going to do it in 2014, but that was much more like Leicester winning the league. It was a one season wonder, because if you look at the Rodgers era, the season before and the season and a half, so after, was nothing particularly special. It was just this one spike of a season, 2013-14. Yet with Klopp, very, very different, a defined, project that was just built upon, and then to suddenly this massive, wave of not just optimism. And like I said before, hope had been swept away. It wasn't hope anymore. This was now expectation. This was anticipation.
Yeah, because I think we all wanted Gerrard, to lift that trophy, and that's the only thing that I really wanted for Stevie, because he's won everything else. But yeah, after that season, you could just tell the players were deflated, and then obviously Stevie just wasn't getting the games, so that was an end of an era for him, which was sad, kind of the way he went out. And also he went out on the 6-1 Stoke loss. That's pretty bad, to say. See ya.
Yes.
But we've risen, as they say. The phoenix has risen again, and we're enjoying an amazing time to be a Reds fan, and that's one of the reasons we like doing this podcast anyway. I mean, me and Steve would talk about Liverpool all day long, even if there's one person listening. But we just like to talk about the history of Liverpool, bring guests on that have stories to tell. And I know Steve got some questions for you.
Oh yeah, hey Steve. Before we start, once again, thanks for coming on. It's a pleasure always to speak with people that get to do their passion as their work as well. So, and that's one of my questions I like to ask is how did you get into the writing aspect of writing about football and about Liverpool?
I started out with the fanzines. I used to just contributed articles to fanzines, and I'd never classed myself as anything other than an accidental author. That's the way that I describe her. Going back to when I was a kid, I used to love writing. Looking back, it was just something I enjoyed doing. Never once thought that there was a career to be made out of it. Did other things. Got to early mid-20s, and I had a friend who was writing for the fanzine Red all over the land.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to get, there used to be a football magazine called 90 Minutes that was it kind of like superseded the likes of Shoot and Match, which were very much, you know, the glossy kind of, this is football and all reverential. You know, this magazine 90 Minutes, it was very much part magazine, part fanzine. You know, there was a lot of fan culture in there. It would be poking fun at players sometimes. It was the first magazine of its type to kind of cotton onto that fanzine culture, that not everything about football is perfect. That, you know, some of it has rough edges, and it's fair game to be taken the rise out of. And there was a letter in the letters page that I responded to, and my response was printed in the magazine in the letters page. And my mate who was writing for the fanzine spotted it, and my name being what it is, it's you know, there's not many of us around. So he said, yeah, well, that was you, wasn't it? It must have been you. So I was like, yeah. And he said, you should contribute to articles to the fanzine. So I did, anonymously as such. You know, I put my name on it, but no address, no return address. So I thought, well, if it gets rejected, at least it's not going to come back to me. And then, to my surprise, it was printed. And then after that, you know, just got more and more involved in that. Must have contributed for 7 or 8 years. And then I stopped shortly before Istanbul. I was travelling to games a whole lot more by then. You know, the away games, virtually every away game by that time. So and working as well. And you know, I just couldn't do it for a while, and I stepped away from it. And then it was about 2003-ish. My wife-to-be tripped across a load of the old fanzines, you know, read through them, and she said, you should start doing this again. You know, so yeah, fair enough. You know, it took about another year or so before I did it. Went back to fanzine contributions, but then I got myself a Twitter account, and the Anfield Wrap kind of like popped up on my timeline. Mm-hmm. Saying that you know, anyone who wants to contribute out, this was in their early-ish days. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I just sent them a load of stuff that I'd done before. They were happy to take a few of my articles. I didn't realise what they grow into, right. what they were growing into.
Yeah, they didn't either.
No, and then yeah, so I did stuff for TAW. Then These Football Times tripped across, you know, my consciousness, and yeah, I just speculatively again threw in an article to them that they ran with, and I've never been out of the place since, which must be a good 5 or 6 years ago now itself. So yeah, just one thing led to another, and These Football Times have a tie-in with Guardian Sport, so they pluck off articles now and then for online purposes. So, you know, once I'd had 2 or 3 articles plucked off for Guardian Sport, and then it just kind of snowballed. I just seemed to trip through one door and then another. One of the lads who was writing for the Anfield Wrap at the time, Sasha Natrani, he approached me and said he was doing a book on Liverpool, and it was the 2014-15 season. But what it was a poor season, but what he wanted to do was have match articles written that weren't quite match articles. It was all about each individual fan's take on Liverpool and why Liverpool and their love of Liverpool and just how they, you know, embrace football. So I was asked to write this chapter for this book, and then that went into print, and it just kind of like think, well, if I can write a chapter for a book, I can write a book. So, and then when you've got kind of like a willing publisher, and then that was it then. So it was kind of like, yes, I wrote my own first book, which came out a year or so ago now. That made it to the shortlist for the Football Book of the Year. Mm-hmm. So it was just one after another, but none of it by design as such, all just organic, and I'd just tripped through one, like I say, I tripped through one door and 3 more would open, and it's got to a point now where, you know, it catches up on me sometimes. You know, my second book's out a week on Monday, and it does catch up with you. You think, well, how did I get here? It's that type of effect. We did a podcast with Neville Southall a few weeks ago, and you're just chatting away with thinking, I'd have never imagined this not so long ago. Yeah. We did a Liverpool magazine for these Football Times, and I was interviewing Jamie Carragher for it, and you're thinking, how has this happened? So I appreciate it completely. Totally unorthodox route through it, but yeah, like I say, an accidental author. But another way of describing it would be fanzine contributor gone rogue.
Yeah, well, you referenced your book, so let's give our listeners and viewers the title. The first book you wrote is a tournament frozen in time, and that was about the what is it, Intercontinental Cup or the
European Cup Winners' Cup?
Yeah, the European Cup Winners' Cup, and I saw that title. I was like, because it hasn't been contested in so many years, and you kind of forget that actually even happened, and that's one of the trophies that Liverpool has never won. So I know that you're writing that book. It seems like, and then your book that you're coming out with, the Cool Kids, right, about the UEFA Cup. And so you have this, it seems like you have this certain affinity for European football. So that start back in the 80s when we were dominating the landscape of that. And then, maybe, and is that when the interest started peaking to think that these were going to be the topics of your books?
It was an accidental thing at first. We did a series of podcasts. I always loved European football anyway, because, like I say, football was just always there. Liverpool were always there. And, in my initial consciousness of football, Liverpool would win the European Cup. And if they didn't, it was unusual. So, we won 77, we won 78, and again in 81. It was more of a story if we didn't win the European Cup in those years. And that's when my formation of my football and affiliations and mind and my take on football was at its infancy almost. So yes, European football was always massive, but it also meant that it was an era in which we didn't get much in the way of live televised football. So the football you watch was either click through a turnstile, go to a game, or it was predominantly in highlights form, little highlights packages. So it was match of the day on a Saturday night. We'd get, an ITV regional show on a Sunday afternoon called Kick-Off, or, the network version would be on a big match. And then midweek, we'd get kind of like Sports Night and Midweek Sports Special. And each of these programs had a defined theme tune. Mm-hmm. So, the theme tune to Sports Night would mean, it always evoke that feeling of European night. But also being of a school age, if there was a big European game on and you were able to watch the highlights and sit up late on a school night and watch these games, then even better. And yes, Liverpool would win it, but then there was also like Ipswich winning the UEFA Cup, the Tottenham in 84, the Cup Winners' Cup finals were epic, Aberdeen in 83. So it was always a very omnipresent thing, So for me, I always had that love, and I always decried the way that they altered the way that the European tournaments were played because of the group stages that hold very little interest even now for me, unless it's Liverpool playing, or it's a final group game that has a knife edge to it. Even if it's Tottenham Inter Milan, or a big game that's like the second or third group stage game that has no immediate impact to whether a team's going through or not, I find it difficult to watch. But whereas European games, the way they were two-legged games. There were no seeded teams. You were at the mercy of the luck of the draw. So if it was the European Cup, to be in it, you had to win your own domestic league title, and then you had to pick your way through to the final past all these potential pitfalls. So if you fell through at the second round, then you go back to the start and win your league title to be back in it. And these tournaments were just epic. So the Cup Winners' Cup had this random effect because it was generated by teams who won their domestic cup competitions, which never had the same theme as the league. Leagues could be won by a small number of clubs, or one team could win a league title a repetitive amount of times. So you would have regulars in the European Cup. You'd have regulars in the UEFA Cup because it was basically you would obtain a place in it via league consistency. You've not won your title, but you've finished somewhere between second and sixth. You go into it. The Cup Winners' Cup, absolutely anyone could win a domestic cup if the sun shone on you. The 1970s, early 80s in England, Sunderland, Southampton and West Ham all won it from the second division. So they entered the Cup Winners' Cup as second division sides. There's that great story of how Castilla, the Real Madrid reserve side, got to the Spanish Cup final in 1980 to play against Real Madrid. So, Real Madrid swept the floor in that final, but they'd also won the league title. So Castilla, Real Madrid's reserve side went into the 80-81 Cup Winners' Cup final. Sorry, Cup Winners' Cup. So yes, all of these magical random things would happen, but because they were midweek games, they were played under floodlights. The trophies were, very kind of like evocative. The names of the teams, the Eastern European teams as well, in particular for me, they would be referred to as crack Eastern European teams. There was just a magical aura about the European games, and there was that knife edge to them because it was two-legged, and if you shot yourself in the foot once, then that would tend to be it.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me, becoming a Liverpool fan back in 1996 time frame when there weren't a lot of games on the television here. You either had Liverpool or Manchester United, and thankfully I picked Liverpool. But didn't really know about European football until 1999, with the Champions League final with Bayern Munich and Manchester United. And it seemed like that game really propelled the European game here in the States, where that became must-watch television starting from that point, and so it kind of coincides with what you were saying, how the growth of the tournament and just the advent of the television rights being spread across the world, it has really helped propel that game into a totally different strata now.
Yeah, it is. I can fully understand that because it does have that effect. I mean, certainly when I was a kid and the way it was played was that there was what I describe as a sense of occasion to them. Mm-hmm. Whereas football for me now, I love watching Liverpool, I get so much out of them. But that sense of occasion has gone. Mm-hmm. Even for the biggest games, I can remember, cup final day in the FA Cup final would be massive because, these two teams had got to the final. There would always be an injury in the build-up to the final, or a player would be suspended. There'd be some kind of drama in the week before, and there'd be a build-up to it. And even if your own team wasn't involved, you would be engrossed by it all. Who was the player that was going to miss out on playing, stuff like that. Because you knew it was going to be a heartbreaking thing because there was this game that was like the biggest moments of a player's career. This was up there with kind of like, the kids being born or the wedding day or whatever it was. It was an absolutely massive thing. Whereas, now you just don't get that feeling. It's just any other game. The players are cocooned in a way that, from very early, so they don't have that necessarily have that knowledge of everyday life, that appreciation for what they're doing almost. So back then, this sense of occasion, and that's the thing that modern football has lost, is the sense of occasion, that you could watch something and then you could just get this feeling that this is absolutely massive, not just for the viewer, but for the players or the people involved in it. The people who were lucky enough to be covering the game, commentating on the game. It was absolutely massive, these games. A World Cup final would be huge. Whereas now, I just get the feeling that it's part commercial, opportunity for some players. Whereas, for back then, it was just the biggest thing. You look at Marco Tardelli and the way that he celebrates that goal in the 1982 World Cup final. And that's the way that I felt about football, and Klopp's Liverpool has made me feel about football again.
Yeah. Klopp makes us all feel different things that we haven't felt in a long time. That's for sure. I wanted to go back to some of your writing for in your articles that I know you kind of intersperse the European game and South American game with a lot of articles about Liverpool. And one that caught my eye was your story about Phil Neal. The title of it is Most Decorated Yet Understated Player in Liverpool History. And it reminds me of, I had the opportunity to meet him in Liverpool and didn't recognize him. And then after someone told me, like, that was Phil Neal, I was like, man, and then I'd go back and read the stats. And luckily I got his autograph on my shirt, but then you go back and you read all the accomplishments that he had, and it's amazing. And I think still a lot of people don't realize just how accomplished he was. And the part of that story I thought was funny was that he was going to have a training match at Anfield, and then they walked him over to Goodison to have his first match. So that, can you kind of tell us some of your favorite articles that you've written about the Liverpool players themselves?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, that's the era of player that I grew up on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I grew, and my dad being a huge Liverpool fan, you know, I grew up on the stories of the 60s and the 70s as well. You know, is adoration of Roger Hunt and Peter Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, he was a huge fan of, you know, you might have only been there for a short span, but Tony Hateley, he loved Tony Hateley.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that concept of the flying winger and the centre forward was my dad's thing massively. So yeah, I grew up on the stories of those, but then, you know, my own viewing was, you know, the Phil Neals of this world, Terry McDermott was massive for me. Absolutely, you know, every Liverpool fan loved and adored Kenny Dalglish, but they had one of the midfielders, one of those four from Souness, McDermott, Case and Kennedy would be their defined favourite. They'd love all of them, but there'd be one more than any other. You know, Carl Kopach's one for kind of like Ray Kennedy, for instance. Absolute disciple of Ray Kennedy, love Ray Kennedy. But Terry McDermott was the one for me with all these audacious goals, the chips, that one against Aberdeen, a Pitt Audrey in 80-81. Magnificent. His, you know, FA Cup semi-final goal against Everton, you know, the goals that he scored against Tottenham, absolutely magical ones. And yeah, you know, Phil Neal was part of this era of player. You know, Zico, they called him, and his accuracy from the penalty shootout. And yeah, that story about how, you know, he was expecting to play for the reserves over at Anfield, but yeah, was walked through Stanley Park over to Goodison to say you're making your debut. You know, these are the types of stories and the stuff that don't really happen now. You know, players are so prepared and so prepped for the highest level that, you know, if they don't make it, then it's a surprise to them rather than being handed the surprise of playing. So yeah, you know, for my writing tends to be one of two things. You know, for This Is Anfield, I write what I call navel gazing pieces. It's observational stuff about the games that happen, but for these Football Times and my books, it is of a historical take. So I've been lucky enough to have the freedom to write about whoever I want, you know, the eras that I want, and yeah, Phil Neal, Alan Kennedy's another one. You know, on the opposite side. You know, I always loved the story about how, you know, on his debut, you know, he was sat in the dressing room waiting for these pearls of wisdom from Paisley and his lieutenants, and you know, he sat there saying, "Well, you're going to tell me what to do," and it's like, well, if you don't know what you're meant to do, what are you doing here? You know, we signed you because we thought you knew how to play football. You know, and yeah, his debut at Anfield, where he was still doing the things that he was expected to do at Newcastle. So in a Newcastle shirt, he'd get the ball in the left back position. He was told to hit it down the line. You know, just get rid, hit it down the line. And he was doing this in his first 20 minutes in a Liverpool shirt. And his teammates coming out and no, we don't do that here. You know, it's the short pass. You know, I'm in a red shirt. I'm the nearest player. You play it to me. You know, it's you know, it's all about keeping the ball. You know, if you hit the ball long, then, you know, there's no saying that we're going to keep hold of that. What are you doing that for? And one of these balls that he played, he took the helmet off an unsuspecting police officer who's patrolling the perimeter of the pitch. So yeah, these stories of these, and like you say, you know, you saw Phil Neal and you didn't recognise him. This happens all the time. I can stand on Flagpole Corner with Andy Noss, and you know, I can see Jimmy Case walk by, and absolutely no one blinks. You know, I don't tend to approach these players just because that's me, and I just want them to enjoy the day, and they don't need pestering. You know, because it's that, you know, don't meet your heroes type of effect for me. You know, I've only ever approached one Liverpool player of that era, and it was Howard Gale, just to by and say, you know, what an iconic individual he is. And I always remember walking up to him and the sense of kind of like dread almost in his eyes, because he didn't know what to expect. Was someone going to come and have a pop at him, or was someone going to kind of like say thanks for everything? So yeah, for me, you know, I think these players have earned the not anonymity, but the privacy if they so want to. But yeah, I see these players walk past time and time again, and very few people kind of like, you know, cotton on to who they are. And part of that's, it's great if they just want to walk through a crowd and get into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I'll think, do they want to stop, and will they appreciate it if someone stops and says, you know what, thanks for Saint Etienne, thanks for kind of like Bayern Munich away in '81, and all of that.
We were very fortunate to have Howard Gale on our show, and got to hear a lot of the stories. And you could tell he's very appreciative of any time he gets to talk about his experiences at Liverpool. As the president of our supporters club here, I've been able to work with our team, and we've been very fortunate to have 9 of the legends come over here and speak to our club. And I don't say that to be cocky or brag about it, but just to kind of tell everybody that it's a luxury to have these occasions, that they're coming over, and you're hearing these stories that you don't necessarily get to hear. When we had Alan Kennedy, great storyteller. We had a great time with him. We had Ronnie Whelan. You wrote a nice piece about Ronnie Whelan being really underappreciated, and you could tell even when he's talking about his experiences at Liverpool, he's still kind of understated, and kind of one of those legends that really appreciates being called a legend. So we've been very fortunate here.
I'll tell you what it is with that generation of player is that. Because we weren't, although we had a Dalglish, we had a Souness, we were never reliant on one particular individual. It was a collective. So each player played some part. So yes, it almost appears like they're underappreciated, and they're not underappreciated. It's just that they were part of a collective that produced a trophy-winning season, a league title, a European Cup, or whatever it was. Liverpool were unlike most other clubs in that respect, is that there wasn't this one talismanic figure that dragged the rest along. That was Manchester United and Brian Robson.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't Liverpool. Liverpool was completely different. And the kind of getting back to that now, because so many times I'll turn around and see someone say, you know what, Salah is underappreciated. And he's not underappreciated. He's not underappreciated at all. It's just that Liverpool aren't solely about Salah. Liverpool are about Mane. It's Firmino. It's about any one of those midfielders that rotates. It's Virgil van Dijk. It's Alisson in goal. So it's about that collective again. And, Liverpool are finally feeling like Liverpool again. And that's why so many people of my generation, of my age and older, are enjoying them so much, because there are so many similarities to that team that the likes of Phil Neal played in. It really isn't that they're individually underappreciated. Everything that they do is massively appreciated, but it is part of a bigger, wider picture.
And that's one of the things that we've mentioned constantly here recently, is that the success of this current team has been able to bridge the gap to the team back in the 80s. And a lot of newer fans are starting to learn that history. And so I think that's been a great byproduct of this whole current team, is that people are going back and that wouldn't necessarily go back to the 80s and look at the accomplishments, but because this team is so compared to that team, it's just a natural thing to try to find out more information. So it's been been great.
There's nothing in football that tends to be new. It always tends to be, a contemporary retake on something that has happened before. Yes, the speed of the game will increase, the fitness of the players increase. Maybe the geometry of the passing is a bit different, but the way that teams are put together, it never really changes. The most successful sides are built on collectives and the personalities and the mindsets of players. That sense of kind of like winning games in the mind. This Liverpool now goes out and so many games where it's won before they get out on the pitch. And this is what the great Liverpool sides of the 70s and 80s did. It's what the likes of Ajax did, and Bayern Munich, and AC Milan, and various Real Madrids and Barcelonas. It's that sense of building an aura, and that there are certain timeless aspects that this Liverpool have taken from past Liverpools that are just so recognisable, and it's wonderful to see.
I have a quick question before we hand it back to Dazza. your new book, Cool Kids, and we'll put a link to your books on our website too, so to help. So Cool Kids, kind of give us who's the coolest cat out there in the European game that you were able to write about?
Oh, well, for me, going back to the Cup Winners' Cup one, I always loved the Eastern European sides because they were laced with a sense of mystery. This wasn't an era as we are now where I could watch any team in any league and watch every single game over the course of a season, whether that's via a valid sports subscription or an illegal internet connection or whatever it is. I can sit and watch any team of any choice from any league all season, but that wasn't the case back then. These teams would trip up and they'd be a mystery. And especially these Eastern European teams for me, the Dynamos and the Spartaks, and they just had these kind of like dangerous sounding names.
Yeah. Partizan.
Exactly. From places from cities that had a name that either had too many or not enough vowels in them. Dinamo Tbilisi were just kind of like epic to me. They destroyed Liverpool in the early rounds of the 79-80 European Cup. They won the Cup Winners' Cup in '81, and they were just the coolest team ever. And the equalising goal in the '81 final is what adorns the front cover of my debut book. And in the background, there's a player called Vitaly Dabaselia, who was the man who would go on to score the winning goal. And he tragically died in late 1982. His car plunged off a mountain road into a river, washed away. And his daughter, Christina, contacted me via Facebook just to say thanks for the cover of the book. And it was the most humbling thing ever. Of all the proud moments that you have in writing a book and seeing it come to fruition, from kind of like imaging how you want the front cover, from writing and naming the chapters, from seeing the PDF of it, the preprint PDF, to picking the pictures, that you go through all these various landmarks before it becomes a book, and then finally it arrives at the door and it's delivered and it's a book, and it's the most amazing. It's the closest thing a male can do to giving birth in a way. It is the most, amazing. And I have a friend who's got his debut book out in a few weeks' time as well, and I've kind of like talked him through it here and there, whenever he's needed a bit of advice. And every time he's gone through a landmark and I've said, I told you about that, but it feels a lot more pronounced than I told you about it, didn't I? No matter how you tell people about these things, until you experience it, you've absolutely no comprehension of what it feels like to do these things. So yeah, but this was one of the big things for me. Dinamo Tbilisi, and I've just surrounded absolutely everything, and they don't play a part really in this second book. This second book about the UEFA Cup, it concentrates on the two-legged final era, which for me was the UEFA Cup, the true UEFA Cup era, when it was the UEFA Cup. The Europa League is not the UEFA Cup, and even the UEFA Cup in one-off finals beyond '97, started to break off the things that made the UEFA Cup, because you had an extra round in the winter, which the European Cup and the Cup Winners' Cup didn't have, and you had the two-legged final. Now, if you can find the footage of, say, Liverpool's 1977 European Cup final, or Aston Villa win it in '82, and as glorious of what happens on the pitch, just look at the stadium, look at the stands, and there are some huge, vast, empty, open spaces in those cavernous stadiums. And many Cup Winners' Cup finals were exactly the same. But the UEFA Cup never was, because it was played on a home and away basis. And it was almost like the Davis Cup in tennis in that respect, was that partisan atmosphere of a home and away basis. And it just had that vibrancy. Look up the footage of, say, the 1978 first leg of the UEFA Cup final, Bastia versus PSV Eindhoven, massively saturated pitch, which ruined the game. But the atmosphere at that game, some of those early 1990s UEFA Cup finals, the all-Italian games, Roma in 91, I think it was as well, against Inter. Such a vibrancy, Juventus versus Parma, 1996, I think it is, 95, sorry. That's another one. Such a vibrant atmosphere that made, and this is where kind of like, the title of the book came, it's where the cool kids hung out, is because you would often have, because the European Cup and the Cup Winners' Cup, you would have one team from each nation apart from the holders. The holders would get to go in as well. The UEFA Cup would have 3 or 4 teams from each nation taking part. So the lineup for the UEFA Cup would often look the strongest of the lot, so from an Italian basis, say Roma have won the league title, it meant that the 2 Milans and Juventus might have been in there. From England, you were throwing in an Arsenal, a Spurs, a Manchester United, maybe an Everton. So it was just chocked with like some great names who were often on the brink of kind of like domestic greatness themselves. You look at Liverpool in 75, 76, for instance, and 72, 73, they won the UEFA Cup in both of those seasons as they were honing in on winning the league title as well. So, UEFA Cup winners would often be, league title winners in waiting as well. So, there would often be some great teams that were just on the brink of glory as well, and just the storied names behind it as well.
I was in Germany back in the late 80s, right before, when the wall came down, and then reunification, and then the Soviet bloc kind of, going away. Did that have an effect on the European game as the borders are opened up and free travel and things like that?
Absolutely, completely. Because what you used to have, like I'll go back to like the Dinamo Tbilisi side and all of those great teams. Each Eastern European nation would have a side or two that was massively dangerous, but contained most of the national team, because certainly look at someone like Kazimir Dana, with Poland. He was only allowed to go and earn greater riches in Western European football in his late 20s. So the ballast of these players' careers would be played behind the Iron Curtain. They were only allowed to leave later on. So, for instance, the Dynamo Kiev, you look at the 86 Dynamo Kiev side that won the Cup Winners' Cup. I think it was 9, 10, 11 of those went to the 1986 World Cup with the Soviet Union. So yes, these teams were and this is what made them so mysterious and interesting, is that these names would trip up, and you would only see them on these brief glimpses in European competitions. And then if you were lucky at a World Cup or European Championship during the summer. So players like the likes of Igor Belanov and Ola Protasov, that Soviet Union side of the mid-1980s that went to Mexico 86, that got to the 1988 European Championship final, absolutely adore that side. Not behind the Iron Curtain, but Denmark to the north in Scandinavia. That side of Preben Elkjær, of Michael Laudrup, Alan Simonsen, so many iconic, brilliant players, just so influenced me emphatically. And it was just these brief, and it was, a lot of it was based on being given the briefest of glimpses of them rather than an overkill of it, because it just gave you that sense that you needed to know and wanted to know more. And in a pre-internet era, you only could do that by really watching them, or that there might be the odd article here and there in a football magazine. But yes, once the Iron Curtain came down, the freedom of movement meant that all of these star players were picked off at the first sign of promise, which is something that still goes on now. Dinamo Tbilisi are a sad shadow of themselves in that respect. They play in the Georgian league, and they lose. Players of any player of any talent is lost very, very quickly, and they struggle along nowadays in non-pandemic terms with just a few hundred watching them. And I find that just quite heartbreaking, really, in that respect. But yeah, it is a case of that down came the Iron Curtain, and the players just proliferated all over, particularly Western Europe.
Now you have a bunch of Brazilians who are Soviet or Russian nationals now, so it goes both ways.
Yes, it does happen.
Steve, as a writer, obviously when you go to the, before the pandemic, you go to the match, and I'm sure, your writing is of a vibe. sort of thing, you know, with the fans. How is it now, you know, because you're just sat in front of a telly, you know, obviously you can't go to the match. So how do you get that, like, you know, I don't know, that oomph for your writing, you know, because I would say for myself, you know, to go to a match, you know, you go with your mates and everything before to the pub, and then you go to the match and you just have this like vibe about you. So is it definitely, you know, obviously different for you now?
Yeah, it's different. I mean, there were games. I don't get to as many away games now. You know, parenthood kind of like happened, so you know, less away games. So I have written about games from just watching them on the television. I'll go to every home game. Still season ticket holder. Still go to all the home games and whatever away games I can. But you know, there is a defined difference to writing about a game that you've watched on television to writing about a game that you've been there in person. You know, I write these after-match pieces for This Is Anfield, and like I say, they're opinion pieces. They're not match reports. They're basically observational pieces, and you know, they can be eclectic about a lot of different things. You know, and there's been games where I've gone to and very little. You know, I could write an article about a 5-0 win and not mention the goals, or not even mention, you know, player could score an hat-trick and not even mention them. You know, because something else has kind of like cottoned on. I remember going to one European game, can't remember which one it was now, but being in the upper main stand, a goal had been scored, and I can see across the top of the roof of the Anfield Road stand into Stanley Park and the car park as well, and the noise that was generated set off the car alarms on the car park, so all the car lights in the darkness are blinking. And I can remember writing an article basically propelled around the fact that the car alarms were going off in the car park, you know, stuff like that. There was another one where it was a cold winter's day. It was a 1-0 win. Very little happened, and a plastic bag blew up off the pitch and just floated up and up and up and up and up. And it was a plastic bag in an up breeze, but I made an article out of it. And these are things that you can't do if you sat watching a game at home. So, you know, a lot of the writing about a game when you sat at home is about what happened on the pitch. You know, I don't introduce anything like, you know, oh, the kids came in and obscured the view of the television. You know, there's none of that. But, you know, it will tend to be about something that, you know, I've observed in a game. And what I tend to do is, rather than write about the wider spectrum of a game, maybe I'll focus on little happenings, or it might be like the shape of a game. I always remember writing an article one time about shapes, basically, because when you're in the upper main stand, and I used to be in the upper centenary prior to that many years ago, there's a sense of detachment from the ground, from the stadium, but you are at a vantage point where you can see all the shapes of the patterns of the play. So it got to a point where you could focus on the ball, but then look around the ball, you would see the shapes of the players, and the players would form a shape around the ball. So the ball would be in the middle, there'd be, you know, maybe a triangle, it would turn into a square, it would go into a rectangle, there would be, you know, a pentagon, or, you know, and just the way it was, the way that the ball and the players moved into various positions. And it was just fascinating to watch. And ever since that clicked, it was kind of like, well, yeah, you can see it again and again and again. So it is just, you know, and then within that article, I've written about this, but then I've not mentioned who scored. I've not mentioned the fact that Salah scored too, that audacious piece of skill from Firmino and stuff like that. But within that, I'll get people who comment on those articles and say that they love those aspects of the article, because it gives them something that they've not seen watching it on the television. You know, it's something that's off camera, or it's something that their view of the game doesn't quite pick up. And it's great when people turn around and you know, thank you for something that you've written. But yeah, for me, the way I write about it, it is very much, you know, based on 2 or 3 observations, and then there's a 1,000-word article that's not mentioned much of the football.
No, I think that's brilliant. You know, because it's very monotone. Some writers, you know, because it is from the aspect of just watching the game. the stats and all that. And the stats and all that, I'm not a stat person. It just bores me.
I don't do stats. It's all about the reactions and it's the shapes and all of that. It's for me. It's I watch football. I can't watch football in a stat driven way.
Yeah.
It's a human game. It's not a calculating game. And I understand that. Excuse me. Things like the throwing experts and stuff like that, and the scientific side of the game. And I get that it
Oh,
hope he's still there.
We got his picture still.
Hey, I don't know if that's the picture he wants on screen for the rest of the show, but he's while he's trying to get back on, it's so fascinating. There's so many aspects to his career, and he's wearing this Rouge shirt, and we're talking about it. He wrote an article about just the influx of foreign players into the English game. And I know we're probably not going to have enough time to talk about that, but that is very interesting part of the history of the league too. There he is.
There he is.
All right.
we
not sure what happened there.
We were just talking about, like, you were stuck on a frame, a picture frame, and Steve was like, "Yeah, that's not the one." I'm sure Stephen wants.
Oh,
hey, Stephen, because when before you dropped off there, you're talking about the differences between a match game writing and then being able to flesh out a lot of different topics. We had the same conversation similar with James Pearce and Simon Hughes when they left watching the games, and then they went to the Athletic, and they're able to really expound on some of their thought processes, and it sounds like it's very similar to what you're saying right now.
Yeah, it's being blessed enough with the freedom of expression. Sounds right, because it doesn't sound right to me, but it is the freedom to say what you want in the way that you want it, and to I've always, the way I've written, whichever version of the writing that I do, whether that's the historical side of it or the contemporary observational stuff that I do for This Is Anfield, I've only ever set out to write things that I quite like to read, and then try to put them across in a style that I'd like to read them in. I'll still write stuff, basically for myself to read almost. I'm amazed that people kind of like read my stuff. Never anything more than amazed when someone says something nice about something I've written. Don't get me wrong, someone will always have an argument over something, or there'll be someone who dislikes what you write. That's just human nature. But yeah, for me, I classed myself earlier on as an accidental author, a fanzine contributor gone rogue, and I'll never see myself as anything other than that. So within that, I set out with that freedom to write the way that I wanted, with no real restrictions. No one has ever once told me, to write in a specific way. I think only once I was involved with a website for a short period of time, and they were kind of like, "Well, could you do this?" And no, I can't do that. I can't do. Or I could do, but I don't want to do that. So we'll just go and do go our own separate ways in that respect. So for me, that I've been blessed to have that freedom from the start, and I can't veer from that now.
Right. Yeah, you seem to have a very unique style, because reading some of the articles that you've posted, and then I'm trying to pinpoint how it's different, but it's very unique, and it keeps the reader interested, especially when you're doing the historical stuff, and you're really filling in some of you kind of evoke some emotions, when you're reading it. So yeah, I enjoy it. So hopefully we'll get more and more people to search for your stuff and promote your book, and I'm looking forward to getting the books.
Oh, great! Thank you very much.
One last one. I'm going to put you on the spot. Predictions for this season: top 6 and bottom 3.
Top 6. Liverpool going to win the title. Liverpool, yes, they are going to win the title. I think from there it's wide open for the Champions League places. I think Manchester City will finish second because they've got Pep Guardiola. You know, he'll not put up with kind of like not finishing at least runner up to Liverpool. But beyond that, I think then it is quite wide open. You know, Everton are an interesting prospect, but within that, once they've absorbed a blow or two, then that's going to be interesting to see how they respond to that. Tottenham with Mourinho, he's kind of yesterday's man, but he's been there and done it. So, you know, he's capable of getting Spurs into that top four spaces. Chelsea have everything in their squad to challenge and be dangerous, apart from their manager. You know, for me, you know, Frank Lampard is out of his depth. He's the wrong man.
I think, you know, that's like giving Gerrard the job for Liverpool now. It's just too early.
It is exactly the same. It is exactly right. You know, I feel like they've just kind of like backed themselves into a bit of a cul-de-sac there, because any kind of uncoupling from Frank Lampard will, you know, have kind of ramifications for his legacy. You know, the way that, you know, if Abramovich sacks him, you know, what the supporters are going to think about that. I just don't see Chelsea challenging under Lampard. If they had another manager, then I'd see them as a threat. Manchester United, no, they've turned back into what they were when I was a kid. But you know, they're capable of reaching the top four. You know, but you know, I think there's seasons where they won't. You know, they have turned into us of the 90s, back into their own version of the 1980s. Arsenal interest me. You know, I think they're bubbling along quite nicely. But within that, you know, you saw the way that we played against them in the league game, and the League Cup game. We were very, very good against them. Leno just had a blinding game, saved several opportunities. But they'll have the beating of the vast majority of the Premier League. But within that, I think we'll find that they'll all take points off each other. You know, because they're all in varying works in progress. So I don't think you're going to find any one of them are going to be able to kind of like pick off the results consistently enough to put in a title challenge. You know, I still say this is Liverpool's title to win. Liverpool and City are the top two teams, and the other four places, the top six. You know, it is going to be the usual suspects, with Everton trying to sneak in there as well. Bottom six, Fulham.
Bottom three.
Bottom three. Just get them out. Just get them out of there.
Who's leaving?
Fulham are doomed. I think Sheffield United are going to find their work cut out a bit this season. They've out of all the teams to struggle post-pandemic, their results. You know, they were looking good for a shot at European football last season before everything stopped. And when they came back, they just couldn't put results together. And they seem to have started this season. Yes, they've signed Ryan Brewster, but I just think they might be a surprise down there in that respect. And the last one, again, I'd probably say. Who else came up? The other promoted
West Brom.
West Brom. I'll go for West Brom there. That was where the one. But yeah, West Brom. You know, I don't want them to go down. One of the best away days going. You know, traditional football club and all that. But yes, teams that have just been promoted tend to struggle, apart from one or two exceptions. And beyond that, you're always looking at that second season syndrome. You know, the teams that do well that first season often have a bit of a backlash that second season.
Hey, you know, I know we're winding down, but you guys kind of touch on a topic that I don't think we've ever discussed, is that, you know, there's a clamor for Steven Gerrard to come back to the team to manage right after Klopp leaves. And I'm thinking that I don't know if FSG would want to have that situation, because, you know, what if he doesn't succeed and, you know, they're getting the blame for not getting the players. And so I'm just thinking right now, because, you know, there's a love-hate with FSG for a lot of people. And I don't know if they'd want that kind of situation on their hands where they could be blamed for, tarnishing somebody's legacy with the club, like Steven Gerrard. I think the safe route would be to bring in a Pep Lenders or something right afterwards. I mean, we don't have to talk about it. I was just thinking out loud.
No, it's a conversation I've had before, is that I wouldn't want him as manager. Just because he's been Steven Gerrard the player. I want to see Steven Gerrard grow as a manager before any consideration to him having the Liverpool job was considered. I think of all the ex-Liverpool midfielders to be a Liverpool manager, I'd probably have Xavi Alonso before him. He's someone who's, again, another thinking footballer. He was a joy to watch, Xavi Alonso. Absolutely adored him. Had such a blast watching him in the Liverpool shirt. Proud of what he did beyond us. And he's another bit like Arteta, like Guardiola. His thinking about football just seems to be almost Matrix-like. He sees between the lines. Gerrard's always been, and his playing style was all action hero, and very, he was the superhero, right? Yeah, we're 3-0 down. It's all right. I'll just go and change into my Superman outfit. I'll come and fix this. Whereas, Alonso was much more measured.
Yeah,
passing was incredible. You could see just in his on-pitch thinking that there's a player who, if he so wishes to be, will be an exceptional manager. But I'd definitely have Xavi Alonso on my future manager wish list. But Pep Linders certainly before Steven Gerrard for me.
Yeah, Daz and I, we're still trying to scrub the Steven Gerrard LA Galaxy experience from our memory bank. So,
well, that was the thing for Gerrard, was that in better circumstances, I think he might have been able to stay at Liverpool that bit longer as a player. I discussed it not so long ago, wrote an article about it a bit and mentioned it, was that how Liverpool players of the past, certainly central ones, because you look at Fabinho, how he played so well at centre-back a couple of weeks ago. And, I think there's an argument there to be made that Fabinho could be, rather than a central midfielder that can play at centre-back, to be a centre-back first and foremost that can step up into the midfield when needed. And Liverpool had a habit of turning midfielders into central defenders. Emlyn Hughes did that. Phil Thompson started out as a central midfielder and dropped into central defence. Jan Molby never let us down in central defence when asked upon, to the point that many thought he'd be able to do it on a permanent basis. I always felt that there could have been a central defender in Steven Gerrard if he was played alongside a Sami Hyypiä type of character that would be able to kind of teach him the disciplines of being a central defender, that he couldn't have just been a central defender that bombs forward at the first chance, that there was time to go forward and there's a time not to go forward. I felt there was an aging centre-back in Steven Gerrard that was missed out on.
I think Grujic he's so big, I think he could slide back into centre-back too if he, given a run of games.
Yeah.
So, we started winding this down like 20 minutes ago. That's what me and Steve do every single interview.
Oh, it's all right. I know how it goes.
We just talk and talk and talk.
Well, Steve, we appreciate your time. We want to be respectful of it, and hopefully you can come back at a later time and continue our discussion, because there's a lot of things I'd like to ask you about. The foreign players coming into the English game and things like that. I know you have a good background of that history, so we do appreciate your time today. And
no problem at all.
It's been a lot of fun. So
thanks for the invite, and just give me a shout again another day.
I appreciate it.